Now, to further this conversation, we have in studio business journalist Rebaone Odirile to dissect the broader determinants that can create a favorable investment opportunity beyond political stability. Re Odirile on the daybreak. Right, we just want to get right into it, right, as we are already saying that President Advocate Duma Boko, during the roundtable discussion in Los Angeles, was emphasizing on the political stability, which is quite true. Of course, it has been proven. Now, we want to go beyond that, beyond political stability. Are we succulent enough as the economy of Botswana? Are we succulent enough for investors to influence investors, to be appealing to investors, to taking a look at our economic stability, for example, as a first?
Thank you very much once again. In the olden days, stability used to be one of those critical factors. It used to say a country has to be stable so that it attracts investors. But I think China demonstrated that even stability doesn't necessarily always result in the attraction of a good number of investors. China has been seen by the West as a country that doesn't conform to their what they will call good political systems, but they still it still attracts a lot of investors. Top tier companies, blue chip companies are leaving their countries and establishing businesses in China. So for Africa, yes, we can say that. We can say stability is important. But as I always say, some investors thrive even in instability. In political instability attracts some investors because some of them even fund such instability, especially those countries that are well endowed with resources, natural resources. They can attract any even companies that are going to fuel instability in the country because it creates an environment for them to siphon a lot of wealth in that country. But I do accept and indeed appreciate that, yes, a country has to be stable. But if you consider stability only, you can say how many top tier companies have we attracted then, because we've been stable for many years. Yeah.
True, that's very true. So now, if we qualify it now in Botswana's context now, would we say Botswana's economy is stable enough to attract more investors? Or could we say we are at we're at the crossroads, or we are actually having a bit of a fluctuation in terms of economic stability, or in terms of our economy? Are we having a depression or somewhere in between? So really, where can we say we are in terms of our economic stability?
No, I think Botswana, as politicians have said, I mean, even the last government led by Rebaone, they emphasized, they kept on saying it, even today they say it, that the fundamentals of the economy are still intact. The biggest problem is the performance of those fundamentals. So that's why even the financial results season has started. Last week we had two companies, that FNB and Letseho, the publicly listed companies, giving out their results, and they did well. So it shows that in terms of what is needed or what sustains the economy, the assets are there. It is the performance of those assets that has become weak. We would be far much worried if some of those assets are no longer there, depleted, phased out in any way or form. But they are still there. What has to be done, or what is being done, is to get them functioning, performing to the optimum levels as it has always been. The vice president was even this week, I think over the weekend, was talking about he was visiting one of the companies here, and the cutting and polishing companies there, and emphasized that they need what kind of investors in Botswana. There's no worry. They're not expressing any worry that our fundamentals have suddenly been phased off or depleted. Just the concern is on the performance level. Yeah.
Actually, I want us to dissect it more, because I think it has come through as a bit of a concern for the general public, because we consistently talk about how our sekhwama sa rona gore se ko tlase ka tsela e ntseng jang, and we're also having analysts speaking about how right now we're at a liquidity crunch, which can actually lead to a recession. From your standpoint, could we say we are still well placed, like you've already said, but I want us to actually look at this other aspect of things, which is coming out to be more prominent to the general public, how it actually affects the economy right now?
Well, liquidity is always a problem. I mean, if liquidity reaches critical levels, obviously it's going to affect the functionality levels of the economy, because you need money. For every investor, for every business, they need money. You will remember that early this year, I don't know whether it was early this year or late last year, December, but the Bank of Botswana announced that they have now loosened the grip on the commercial banks to be able to now trade among each other with foreign forex, because they realize that these banks do have money, but the foreign currency, but traditionally they always depend on Bank of Botswana. So the reason why they did that was for the issue of liquidity, access, availability of liquidity. Let's improve the liquidity status in the country. So yes, as you said, if we have a liquidity problem, experts are making it very clear that we're going to have a problem in terms of the economy. What would you, once you run short of money to buy the inputs that you need in a factory for you to produce, then of course you are going to affect the market, because people rush to shops where they buy your product, it will not be there, or you will be paying your suppliers late, and you're not going to be getting the supplies in time, and therefore that will of course affect the revenue streams. And if you affect the revenue streams, it means government is not getting taxes in time, people are not getting paid in time, you're not getting profits, investors are not getting profits. So of course it boils down to economic problem.
Definitely. And of course, we've also experienced increased unemployment. Of recent, we've announced about 1,200 people who've lost jobs because of the USAID's retractment. So, of course, we're still experiencing more. But in the end, at the end of this conversation, I believe we will hone it down to saying the basics of the economy are in place, like you said at the very beginning. So let's speak also more on the infrastructural developments. Which of those could we say are crucial in investment opportunities, or in appetizing investors here in Botswana, to say if an investor sees so and so, for example, roads well in place, will definitely attract investors. But in that regard, where are we as Botswana?
Well, I think the former government, or the previous government led by former President Rebaone, when they announced the budget, the current budget that is just about to end, they actually said they have put in stimulus budget, and they said it will be spent on development. And they one of the things that was going to benefit was roads infrastructure. I think that was acknowledging that roads, as you said, it is critical. It's one of those assets that we need. Secondly, roads, availability of roads means that you can set up a business anywhere in Botswana, and you'll still have a road network that takes your goods to the market where you serve, you do well. It can be a market in Lubazin, a market in Gaborone, a market anywhere else in Africa. As long as the roads are good, an investor will be happy. Secondly, of course, the other thing is communication, digital communication. That is also one infrastructure that is needed that will attract investors, because an investor will know that I'll keep communicating with my people in Botswana, even when I'm in Poland or in Czech Republic, anywhere else. So transportation and communication are going to be critical. But more than that, more than infrastructure, of course, you also need efficiency. And And when the president, you may have seen the story that President Boko signed an agreement with BPO, a BPO company, that will be showed interest to come here. Those are the kind of businesses or investors who are not looking for market. They are not necessarily looking for market or for resources. They're looking for efficiency. So those are people that can have an office here and have employees here in Botswana and serve a company that is in Switzerland. So he is talking to a company that wants efficiency, and I hope that that signing was to say to that company that we do have civil service, or rather the workforce that can deliver accordingly. Ndabahalat was also the vice president when he was at KGK. He also talked about we need investors who align with the new Botswana.
Right.
And that new Botswana, I think one of the alignment would be ability to pay 4,000 pula minimum wage. And I've heard people not happy about 4,000, saying it will disrupt the economy negatively. But I do remember that in 1933, Franklin Roosevelt, the US president, when he first talked about living wage, there was a lot of uproar there. But he said, at the end of the day, he said, any company that is not prepared to pay the minimum wage, the living wage we are prescribing, is not qualified to do business in the USA. So I think when he said we need companies that align with New Botswana, he probably will include that if you can't pay 4,000 pula, probably you're not qualified to do business here because you are taking the standard to the next level.
Definitely. And I agree with you that we are actually going to the next level with those measures that are coming in place. Now, speaking of which, let's speak about Botswana's legal framework as well. How it is also appealing to investors, or how it can also protect investors. Take a look, for example, the legislation, these laws that are passed in Parliament, for example. Do we find them quite protective to external investors, for example? And if we can also take a look at the PPRA, the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority, some of the requirements they have for the contractors or the companies that they deal with, they really prioritize citizen-owned companies. I mean, taking a look at such, but generally the legislation, or just generally the legal framework in Botswana, how protective is it to investors? How succulent as well is it to investors?
I think generally it has always been the concern to investors in terms of legislation has always been if a new government comes in, takes over, the new party comes over and takes the state power, is our investment protected? Or does our investment protection depends on who is in power? And I think at least this is the first time that we're having a new government formed by a totally new party. And I think so far, I haven't had Business Botswana, which is the voice of the business community, haven't had a complaint from them that there's any threat to investments with the coming in of a new party in government. So in that aspect, I'll probably say, in that perspective, I'll probably submit that, yes, so far, so good. It doesn't look like we have taken a detour from what we have been seeing with government changing from one phase to the next guy taking over, and still respecting the interests of foreign investors, or rather the interest of investors. So yes, I will submit that in terms of protection of investors' investments, it appears that there is nothing threatens those investments. As I said, we would have had the first people to make noise would be Business Botswana. So that hasn't, we haven't had anything to that effect. When the Economic Inclusion Act was made, there was a lot of talk of more of citizens must be at the forefront. Let's mention that. Others were saying, let's mention that it must be indigenous citizens. And I know that eventually the government carried the day to say that no, we're not going to mention indigenous in the act, but we will say, I think they used the word something like appropriate or preferred in citizens or deserving citizens, something like that. Because they were saying, if we say indigenous, we will appear to say that those who naturalized are now going to be excluded. So I think even with such an act that talked to the economy and getting the economy in the hands of citizens, still, there has not been any complaint from foreign investors to say that this is going to threaten our protection of our assets, our investments. They're still getting their, remember, you invest here, you are still able to get your funds. Capital flight is still allowed. You can make money here and then repatriate your funds as easily as possible.
Most definitely. Thank you so much for breaking it down like that. Now we're nearing the conclusion of our conversation, but let's talk also about how Botswana manages its economic fluctuations, to maintain investor confidence. How are we doing in that regard? Are we appealing in terms of what we are saying, either on media or whichever gatherings we might be in? Can we say we are managing well the fluctuations that we ourselves are experiencing, which of course you already qualified as not so heavy to the basics of running the economy? Could we say we are managing that well?
I think if I understand your question, it can be answered in two ways. One, in terms of monetary policy, legislation, but it can also be managed in terms of PR or communication, the narrative that how we put our story out there. I think let's start with the first one. I mean, the last one is that, are we doing well on that regard? I wouldn't say yes. I wouldn't say we're doing well. I think we have remained trapped in the olden ways of saying we are a peaceful country, we are stable, but that hasn't won us a lot of investors that we need. I think it then demands on our part to now find a new way of fighting for the influence on the global stage, to influence investors and of course even consumers, to be able to get consumers to come to Botswana and spend their money here, high spenders, to come to Botswana and see that we can just visit Botswana and enjoy our time there. And whilst there, I'll be able to buy ABC because I've heard of this, that they have ABC in the country. Let's say I'll go to Botswana and buy something, jewelry made out of natural diamonds from that country. If America is now allowing, I'll give an example, if America is now allowing lab-grown diamonds or fake diamonds, as the president wants us to say, to refer to them, and we make a place here where people can buy something natural and they know that here there's no contamination with lab diamonds. And the story goes out to say, if you want something very natural from natural diamonds, there's no other place to go to other than to go to Botswana. So you get affluent people coming into Botswana knowing that in that country, there's no possibility that there will be, I think I'm buying a natural diamond and I'm buying something that has been made from lab. So yes, and in January, just the last part, in December, when they made a tracking in the Pula and the basket of currencies, that of course was also a demonstration to say that even monetarily, using the instrument called monetary policy, we are really alert, vigilant enough to know what's developments in the market and to act accordingly. So yes, in both aspects, that will be my answer. But I want to emphasize on the part of winning the mindsets, winning the influence, the fight for influencing consumers. Perhaps that is where we are lacking. And I think I've said that even in one meeting that I was privileged to have with one of the CEOs, to say that we're not winning, we're not demonstrating new line of thinking in terms of coming up with a new narrative that emphatically tells our story and not just woo investors but also consumers to come and buy from here.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for putting it that way. But of course, you've laid it down properly and perfectly well as we conclude our conversation. But thank you so much for your time once again this morning, Mr. Odirile.
Pleasure's mine.
Absolutely. Of course, that was Mr. Odirile. Of course, we're talking the economy, and of course, how the economy, how we can view it beyond the political stability here in Botswana. And of course, we concluded that, of course, our market, our economy in Botswana is still very well succulent. If you're an investor, do come through. Good